Have you ever wondered just how much of what we know about the solar system is actually wrong? We grow up learning certain facts about space. The Sun is a giant fireball, Pluto is the last planet, Mercury is the hottest. But how many of these are true, and how many are just outdated, oversimplified, or flat out incorrect? Today on Cosmic Compass, let's take a closer look. We're counting down the top 10 misconceptions about our solar system, and some of these might just surprise you. So sit back, stay curious, and let's find out what you might have misunderstood about the cosmic neighbourhood we call home. At first glance, the sun looks like it's ablaze, a swirling, roaring inferno. But in truth, it's not burning in the way we typically think. Fire, as we know, it is a chemical reaction combustion like wood or gasoline, igniting in the presence of oxygen. But the sun's energy doesn't come from fire. It comes from nuclear fusion, a process happening deep in its core where hydrogen atoms fuse to form helium under extreme pressure and temperature. The temperature at the sun's core reaches around 15 million degrees Celsius. This fusion produces the immense energy that eventually reaches us as sunlight. By the time it escapes to the sun's surface, which is about 5,500 degrees arcs, it still glows brilliantly, though much cooler than its core. Just to compare, a wood fire burns at around 500 degrees. So yes, the sun is hot, unimaginably so, but it's not burning, it's fusing. For years, Pluto was taught as the ninth and final planet, but in reality, Pluto is far from being the last object in the solar system. It resides in the Kuiper Belt, a vast region beyond Neptune filled with icy bodies and dwarf planets. And beyond that lies the even more distant Oort cloud, a spherical shell of icy remnants believed to surround the solar system like a ghostly halo. Pluto isn't even the most distant dwarf planet. Others like Haumea Makemake and especially Eris orbit much farther out. In fact, Eris is nearly 3 times farther from the Sun than Pluto is today, and even more massive. So, no, Pluto is not the end of the solar system, it's just one resident of a much larger, colder and stranger frontier. It's easy to think of Saturn and immediately picture those elegant golden rings. But did you know all the gas giants in our solar system have rings? Yes, Jupiter, Uranus and Neptune all have their own ring systems. They're just much fainter and harder to see from Earth. Saturn's rings are the most prominent because they're large, bright and reflective. But when spacecraft like Voyager and Cassini visited the other giants, faint rings became visible, delicate structures made of dust, ice and rock particles. Uranus, for example, has at least 13 known rings, some bright, some barely visible. Neptune has arcs, partial rings that seem to defy gravity. So while Saturn steals the show, it's far from alone in this shimmering category. You might picture comets as alien visitors, icy travelers from the deep cosmos. But the truth is, comets are born within our own solar system. Most of them originate from either the Kuiper Belt or the Oort cloud, both gravitationally bound to our Sun. Comets with short orbits, returning every few decades or centuries, usually come from the Kuiper Belt. Those with long erratic paths returning only once every few thousand years, or perhaps never, are believed to come from the distant Oort cloud. So no comets are not foreign objects crashing our party. They're ancient members of our solar family just making rare appearances. Blame it on Hollywood. Films often show asteroids as crowded minefields where pilots must swerve and dodge incoming rocks. In reality, the asteroid belt is mostly empty space. Though there are hundreds of thousands of asteroids between Mars and Jupiter, they're spread out over such a vast volume that the average distance between 2 large asteroids is about 1 million kilometres. That's nearly 3 times the distance from Earth to the Moon. In fact, several spacecraft, including Pioneer, Voyager and New Horizons, have passed through the belt without incident. So unless you're flying through it in a galaxy far, far away, it's probably going to be smooth sailing. For years, scientists believed Mercury always showed the same face to the Sun, just as our Moon does to Earth. But that was an illusion. Thanks to radar observations in 1965 CE, we now know that Mercury has a 3-2 spin orbit resonance. This means that for every 2 orbits Mercury makes around the Sun, it completes 3 full rotations on its axis. Strangely, because of this resonance and its elliptical orbit, a solar day on Mercury from one sunrise to the next lasts about 176 Earth days. That's longer than its 88-day year. So while the idea of Mercury being locked to the Sun was reasonable, it simply isn't true. It seems logical. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, so it must be the hottest. Right, not quite. That title actually goes to Venus. Despite being second from the Sun, Venus has a thick atmosphere made mostly of carbon dioxide, which traps heat via the greenhouse effect. Sunlight gets in, but the heat can't escape. Mercury, by contrast, has no real atmosphere to speak of, so while it gets very hot on the day side up to 430 degree R, it also cools rapidly on the night side as low as 180 degree Celsius. Venus, on the other hand, maintains a uniform surface temperature of around 462 degrees Celsius day and night. That's hot enough to melt lead, and it makes Venus the true inferno of our solar system. We often picture the solar system as a collection of planets orbiting a large star, but few realize just how dominant the Sun actually is. The Sun contains over 99.8% of the total mass of the entire solar system. Let that sink in. All the planets, moons, asteroids, comets, and Earth make up the remaining 0.2%. Most of that 0.2% is Jupiter, Earth practically negligible on the scale. In a very real sense, the solar system is the Sun. Everything else is just along for the ride. You've seen the images glowing comets with long sweeping tails trailing behind them. But here's the thing, comets don't always look like that. Far from the Sun, a comet is just a cold, dark ball of ice and rock. It only grows a visible coma and tail when it gets close enough to the Sun for the heat to vaporize its ices. The result is a glowing cloud sometimes larger than the Sun itself, and one or more tails that stretch for millions of kilometers. These tails always point away from the Sun, driven by solar wind and radiation pressure. But once a comet retreats into the outer reaches that glow, vanishes. So yes, most of the time comets look nothing like comets. This is a big one and an easy mistake to make. The Big Bang, which occurred roughly 13.8 billion years ago, created the universe itself, space-time, matter and energy. But our solar system didn't form until about 4.5 billion years ago, long after the first stars had already lived and died. It was born from the collapse of a giant molecular cloud enriched with the remnants of ancient stars. The material spun into a disk, with the bulk of it forming our Sun. The leftover debris became the planets, moons, asteroids and comets. In other words, we're made from star stuff, but we're not as old as the universe. So how many of these did you believe before watching? It's fascinating, isn't it? How some of our most obvious ideas about the solar system turn out to be wrong, not because we weren't curious, but because science is always evolving. As our tools improve, so does our understanding. If you enjoyed this journey into cosmic misconceptions, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cosmic Compass for more deep space storytelling. And if you've heard any other wild myths about space, leave them in the comments. We might just explore them in the next episode. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious.